If you've seen the earlier videos, you already know this part. Interviews don't usually go wrong all at once. They narrow. The questions get easier. The follow ups disappear. The energy shifts. And once that happens, there's one mistake that costs candidates more offers than anything else. They try to reopen the interview. This video is not about doing that and why that advice actually works in real hiring decisions. Here's the advice clearly stated. Once an interview starts narrowing, stop trying to make it better. Your job is to avoid making it worse. That's it. That single shift explains everything else. Let me explain why this matters. Early in an interview, adding more helps. Explaining your thinking helps. Showing range helps. But once the interview narrows, the evaluation changes. At that point, interviewers aren't listening for new ideas anymore. They're watching how you behave when the scope tightens. And this is where people get into trouble. Here's the general pattern I see all the time. A candidate notices the shift. They feel the interview cooling. And internally, they think, I need to add something before this ends. So, they start doing more. They extend answers. They clarify things that weren't questioned. They revisit earlier points. They explain their thinking again, just to be safe. From the candidate side, this feels responsible. From the interviewer side, it often signals something very specific. This person doesn't know when to stop. And late in an interview, knowing when to stop matters more than sounding smart. Here's why. Once narrowing begins, interviewers are no longer deciding whether you're capable. They're deciding whether you're safe to work with under constraint. They're watching for things like, do you escalate when nothing is escalating? Do you add complexity when things are being simplified? Or do you struggle to contain your response when pressure appears? So when you keep adding, even good information starts working against you. Not because it's wrong, but because it creates friction. Let's make this concrete. Here's a general example first. Imagine an interviewer asks you late in the interview, how do you handle tight deadlines? You answer it clearly, and it's fine. But then you keep going. You add background. You explain how you think about prioritization. You give a second example. You circle back to something you said earlier. Now, technically, nothing you say is bad, but the interviewer isn't thinking about your content anymore. They're thinking, this person struggles to contain themselves when things narrow. That's the risk signal. Now, let's make it very real. Here's a specific common scenario. You're interviewing for a mid-level role. The interviewer asks near the end, is there anything you do differently on your last project? You answer, I'd probably align earlier with stakeholders to avoid late changes. That answer by itself is fine. But then you add, what I mean is, there were a lot of moving parts and I think I'd had more time, or if the priorities had been clearer, I could have structured it differently. Not that it went badly, it just taught me a lot about communication and expectations. All of that was probably unnecessary. You see, this is where the damage happens. Not because you admitted something, but because you kept expanding after the point had already landed. From the interviewer's side, this sounds like this person over explains when things feel uncertain. That's exactly the behavior narrowing is meant to test. So, here's the advice again, very plainly. Once an interview starts narrowing, do not try to reopen it. Don't expand, don't rescue, don't add context just in case. Protect the signal you've already given. Here's why this advice works. Late stage interviews are about risk control, not upside. Interviewers already know if you're qualified. What they're quietly deciding is, will this person create friction when things get tight? Restraint answers that question for them positively. This is the internal rule that actually helps. Once narrowing begins, tell yourself, my job right now is not to add value. My job is to not add risk. That one instruction will change how you answer without forcing anything. You'll stop sooner. You'll explain less. You'll sound calmer. And that's exactly what's being evaluated. This advice feels a little uncomfortable, and that's why people ignore it. Talking feels like control, right? Explaining feels like effort. Adding feels responsible. But late stage interviews don't reward effort. They reward containment. Containment itself signals judgment, composure, predictability, low friction. Those are hiring signals. And here's why this mistake is so hard to catch. Most interviews still feel fine when things go wrong. No one pushes back. No one corrects you, right? No tension appears. So candidates leave thinking, oh, it went pretty good. It went okay. But the interview didn't improve. It just resolved. And once it resolves, every extra word is interpreted differently. There's one last thing to be clear about. This advice does not mean being quiet to seem mysterious. It does not mean withholding answers. It doesn't even mean disengaging. It means matching your behavior to the phase the interview is in. When exploration ends, expansion becomes noise. So take this with you. Once an interview narrows, don't try to rescue it. Don't try to reopen it. Don't try to prove more. Just protect the signal you've already given. That alone can be the difference between a quiet rejection and a quiet, let's keep them in consideration. In the next video, we'll talk about why shorter answers work better once interviews cool, and how stopping cleanly often helps more than sounding strong. If this sounds familiar to you, you're not alone. And now you know what to do.